the second part of the last lesson beginning from here. While I was thinking of all this, if you did not watch the first part, I have given the link in the description box. You can visit there. Look at the second part. While I was thinking of all this, I heard my name called. It was my turn to recite. Recite what? To recite the rules of participles. Rules of participles. That Monsieur Hamel had already told them. He would ask the rules of participles in the next class. What would I not have given to be able to say that dreadful rule for the participle, all through very loud, clear, and without one mistake? This was his task. He had to recite the rules of participles loud and very clear without one mistake in front of the entire classroom. But I got mixed up. Mixed up here means he got confused. His task was to recite or to speak publicly, to deliver or recount the rules of participles. But when his name was called, he was totally confused from the very beginning itself. So he stood there holding on to my desk. So he just stood there. He held on his desk and his heart was beating, not daring to look up. He had no courage to look up or to look at the face of his master, Monsieur Hamel. He stood there. He stood there as a stone, without looking anybody, because he was not able to speak publicly the rules of participles. For him, the rules of participles are dreadful. In reality, the rules are not dreadful, but for little Franz, those were dreadful rules. So he stood there because he did not learn even a single word of that rules. This was the reality. He stood there. I heard Monsieur Hamel say to me, when he was not able to recite the rules, his master said to him, I won't scold you, little Franz. You must feel bad enough. He was not ready to scold. Scold means to chide, to rebuke. Chide or rebuke. This child, little Franz, you must feel bad enough. You have already feeling so bad enough of your condition. You did not learn the rules of participles. So no more scolding. Monsieur Hamel said, see how it is? Then he addressed the entire classroom there. See how things are going on here. How it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, this is the generalization of people's attitude towards their studies. Every day we have said to ourselves, bah, I have plenty of time. I will learn it tomorrow. This is the common attitude of students to their learning. They naturally postpone their lessons to learn for tomorrow because they have plenty of time before them. So they naturally postpone their lessons. This general condition of the students, Monsieur Hamel remarked in the classroom. And now you see where we have come out. Then he continued, now look at the situation where we have come out by postponing all our lessons for tomorrow. That is the great trouble with Alsace. So this was the great trouble with Alsace. What was the great trouble with Alsace? They postponed their learning for tomorrow. They every day postponed their learning for tomorrow, and that was the great trouble with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Puts off means postpone. She postponed. She here means Alsace, the district, the people of the district Alsace. She puts off her learning till tomorrow. Now, those fellows here means the Germans, because Alsace was conquered by German soldiers. So those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, those German fellows or Prussian soldiers who are parading at the back of the sawmill, they had the right to say to you, how is it? You pretend to be Frenchmen, and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language. Now you reached at a position like this. You have to pretend yourself as Frenchmen, but you don't know neither to write nor to speak. This is the situation in which you reached at last. The master remembered everyone in the classroom. But you are not worst, poor little Franz. Then he turned to that little boy, Franz. But you are not the worst. Not only you are to be blamed for all this, you are not the only one, the worst one in little Franz. We have all a great deal. A great deal means a great part of. To reproach ourselves with. Reproach means to blamed or criticized or accused. You are not the only one to be criticized or blamed, reproached. Don't forget the meaning of the word reproach. Reproach means to criticize, to blame, or to accuse. You are not the only one to be criticized or blamed and reproach ourselves with. We also have to be reproached with, the master remarked. They just send you to school, but they are not anxious enough. They are not that much careful about your studies. They preferred to put you to work on farm or at the mills so as to have a little more money. When they wanted a little more money to manage their family budget, they put you to work on either their farms or their mills. So they too are to be blamed, the master said. And then he turned this criticism towards himself. I have been to blame also. So he was also part of this situation. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers? Many a time, the master used to send these children to water his plants in the garden. Instead of learning your lessons, instead of parting their lessons to them, he sent these children to water the plants. And when I wanted to go fishing, so when he wanted to go for a fishing, did I not just give you a holiday? What he did? He did declare a holiday for the entire school. That also he did, because he also thought that there was a plenty of time to teach. So the blame is with all the stakeholders of this system, the children, the parents, and the teachers. They are responsible for this situation, that even though they are French people, they did not know how to write and how to speak properly the French language. Now they lost their chance to learn more, because the Alsace, now the part of Germans or Prussians, they will decide which language to be taught there. Then, from one thing to another, Monsieur Hamel went on to talk of the French language. Went on means continued. He continued to talk of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world. This was his first opinion about the French language. It is the most beautiful language in the world. The clearest, the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Then he said that French was the clearest and most logical language of the world. So they must guard it. Guard means protect it among themselves. And he urged the people of Alsace is called Alsatians. Alsatians. He urged the people of Alsace to guard it and never forget their language, because when a people are enslaved, when they are forced to enslave by the Germans or the Prussians, as long as they hold fast to their language, if they hold fast to their language, hold fast means the act of gripping strongly. If they hold fast to their language, if they never forget their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. It would act like the key to their prison to come out of that enslavement, to come out of that prison. That is the key to their freedom. So he urges the Alsatians sitting in the classroom that their language will become the key to their freedom. Through this, he urges, he generates the feeling of love towards their French language, the people of Alsace. Also, he reveals that their language is their identity. If they lose their language, they lose their identity. So he urges the people of Alsace to hold fast their language. If they lose their language, they lose their identity. This is what he did in the class. Then he opened a grammar and read us our lesson. After talking about the importance of French language, he taught a grammar lesson for the class. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. On the day, the grammar lesson, he couldn't feel any difficulty. Little Franz felt no difficulty to grasp, to understand the grammar lesson that Monsieur Hamel taught him on the day. All he said seemed so easy, so easy. Look at he repeated the way by which he understood the lesson. It was so easy. I think too that I had never listened to so carefully. He had never listened the class of Monsieur Hamel so carefully, and that he had never explained everything so much patience. Two things took place there. He had never listened to him so carefully, and Monsieur Hamel never explained things so patiently and clearly. When both this happened in the classroom, real learning happened there. So this story says us about linguistic chauvinism. chauvinism. Here, linguistic chauvinism of the Prussians, when they acquired the land of the French, they started dominating over these two districts. Linguistic chauvinism means the strong and unreasonable belief that your own country and language is the best and important. That is the concept of linguistic chauvinism. It's an unreasonable belief. When we are talking about linguistic chauvinism, which means the unreasonable belief, irrational belief that my language is the best. The acquisition of power over the Alsatians made the Prussians so domineering that they imposed their language on them. Once these Prussians acquired the land of the French people, they started domineering the geographical area, not only the conquered land, but they also wanted to impose their German language in the land of French. So this is the linguistic chauvinism of the Prussians. We see in this lesson, the last lesson, linguistic chauvinism, because the entire story is written on this theme, linguistic chauvinism. The Germans conquered the French districts. The political conquering does not complete there. They wanted to make this territory their own by taking away the identity of the people of these two districts. To remove the identity of the people, they wanted to take away their language. So they imposed their language, the German language, in the two districts. That is the linguistic chauvinism of the Prussians on the French territories we see in the story. When we discuss the story in a critical way, this part of the story says that this Hamel become the spokesperson of the author, because he wanted the people to hold fast the language, the French language, because it becomes the key to their freedom. And he reminds the people that if they lose their language, they lose their identity. So Monsieur Hamel is the spokesperson of the author. Here we can see. Now come to the next part of the story. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away. The class seemed like this. He wanted to give all his knowledge at one stroke to his students, to give us all he knew before going away, and to put it all into our heads at one stroke. At one stroke means at one blow, at one stretch. He wanted to explain everything to the students there, because there is no chance before him to explain it for tomorrow. This is the last hour of his class. No more chance is there to explain about his own language. After grammar, we had a lesson in writing. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. When he completed the grammar lesson, immediately after that, he started the next lesson of writing. That day, Monsieur Hamel had new copies for us. New copies here means new photocopies, new handout for the children, written in beautiful round hand. The new copies or handout had a certain round written letters in it, like France, Alsace, France, Alsace. Very beautifully he wrote the words of France and Alsace in the copies. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom. These words, France and Alsace, written in the copies, they looked like little white flags everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the road at the top of our desk. Hung from the road. A road was kept at the center of their desk, and these flags are hanging from the road, from the top of our desk. They felt like that. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work. The writer, the narrator, says us, you ought to have seen how everyone set to work. Everyone is ready to work. How quiet it was. The class was so quiet. Everyone engaged in the practice of writing. No other business was going on there except writing practice. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Look at the exaggeration of the situation there. The only sound could be heard there was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Even though the sound was not hearable, not audible, the writing of a pen over a paper, the writing of pens on a paper could not be heard. But he emphasized the silence there, the silence in the classroom. The only sound that could be heard there was the scratching of pens over the paper. Once, some beetles flew in. In between, some beetles flew in the classroom, but nobody paid any attention to them, not even the littlest ones. Even the littlest ones in the class did not care about the beetles. It was unusual. That is why he mentioned this incident here. Who worked right on tracing their fish hooks. The fish hook letters of French, they wanted to complete it. They wanted to imitate that letters, how to write that letter like the shape of fish hooks. They wanted to write it correctly. They wanted to reproduce that design, that fish hook letters in their copies, as if that was French too. Yes, because they felt that this difficult alphabet is also part of French. On the roof, the pigeons cooed very low. While this writing practice was going on, little Franz heard the pigeons. They are producing certain cooing sound. And I thought to myself, when he heard the cooing of the pigeons, a thought came in his mind. Will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? This is the doubt that came in little Franz's mind. Will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? Are they able to make these pigeons sing in German language? It's a sarcasm against the imposition of a foreign language to these people. Little Franz considers his language as a natural part of his life. Nobody can take away from him, like the cooing of a pigeon. The cooing is so natural to the pigeon, like that French is so natural to the Alsatians. Nobody can take away from them. So, sarcastically, an idea came into his mind. Are they able to make these pigeons sing in German. That is, the little boy's sarcastic idea comes in his mind against this invasion, the invasion on their own mother tongue. He protests in this way. Look at the next paragraph. Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw Monsieur Hamel sitting motionless in his chair. Motionless means still, without any movement. Gazing first at one thing. Gazing means looking. He was looking first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in the little schoolroom. He wanted to fix everything in his mind. He was videographing everything in his mind, how it looked. He wanted to fix everything in his mind in the little schoolroom. Fancy. For 40 years he had been there in the same place with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. This master, Monsieur Hamel, he was teaching in the same school for the last 40 years. And this classroom and the garden outside became part of his life. So it should be a very painful moment for him to leave all those things at a particular moment. So it was a painful thing for him to leave all these things and go away. So he wanted to fix each and every object inside the classroom and outside there to fix in his mind. So motionless, he sat down there and absorbing each and everything there, just like that. Only the desks and benches had been worn smooth. Worn smooth means because of the use. For the last 40 years, the same desks and benches had been using there, so they worn out smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller. The walnut trees just outside the classroom, they were taller now, and the hop vine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. Then he looked at the hop vine that he had planted himself, that twined about the window and reached up to the roof. How it must have broken his heart. All these things to leave all of a sudden, that should have broken his heart. To leave it all, poor man. To hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks. A new character is introduced here. His sister. Monsieur Hamel's sister is introduced here. She was moving about in the room above. Her footsteps could be heard in the classroom there. She was packing their trunks, the trunk boxes. She was packing their personal belongings, for they must leave the country next day. So she has already started the preparation for leaving the place. She was packing everything that they could take away from the little schoolroom. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. Yet this man showed courage to hear every lesson to the last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history. He taught every lesson on the last day. After writing, he gave a history lesson. And then babies chanted their ba, be, bi, bo, boo. The alphabet, the song of alphabet, the little children chanted in unison. Down there at the back of the room, old Hosser had put on his spectacles and holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. The interesting thing was that old Hauser, he also repeated these words, repeated this alphabet after the little children in the classroom. Holding the primer in his both hands, he spelled the letters along with these little ones in the classroom. You could see that he too was crying. Yes, this old Hauser was on the brim of a cry. His voice trembled with emotion. His voice was trembling with emotion because the next day he couldn't learn this French language from a French school. And the narrator, Little Franz, says that it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. It was a mixture of both these emotions, laughter and cry. When they heard this old man was at the brim of breakdown and chanting the alphabet and crying, when Little Franz and the other children saw this scene, they wanted to laugh. At the same time, they are very solemn, they are very serious about the situation. They wanted to cry also. How well I remember it, the last lesson. Anyhow, Little Franz was able to remember, able to learn, able to understand the last lesson so well. Come to the last page of the lesson. All at once, the church bell struck 12. Then the Angelus. Angelus is a Catholic prayer, a midday prayer. Midday prayer. The church bell struck at 12 and it was the time for the midday prayer, Angelus. Angelus is the Catholic prayer. At the same moment, the trumpets of the Prussians, the wind musical instrument of trumpets, the trumpets of the Prussians sounded. They are returning from the drill. Their drill was over and they were coming back. And the trumpet sounded under our windows. They were just passing outside the school window. They could understand it. Monsieur Hamel stood up, very pale. Their master, Monsieur Hamel, he stood up from his chair. He looked very pale. He looked so sad because he lost the chance to teach French language, his own mother tongue, to the people there, the French people. And he stood up very pale in his chair. Then I never saw him look so tall. This is a comment by the narrator, Little Franz. He never saw him look so tall. Look so tall here means seemed so confident. This man seemed so confident when he stood up in his chair. My friends, said he, but something choked him. Choked here means that blocked, that stopped him. He could not speak out. Words are not coming out from his mind. He stopped there because of emotion, because of his sad because of his feeling. He couldn't speak. He simply said, "My friends, I," then stopped. Then he turned to the blackboard. As he couldn't speak, he then turned to the blackboard, then took a piece of chalk. He took a piece of chalk and bearing on with all his might. Might means power. Bearing on means gathering on. Gathered all his might, all his power. Then he wrote as large as he could, "Vive la France." Vive la France means long live France. These are the last words he wrote on the blackboard. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall. Leaned means bend towards the wall. He bent his head towards the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture. Gesture is a body language. He showed a sign with his hands to us with his hand. "School is dismissed, you may go." This is the gesture. This is the sign he showed at the end of the lesson. That is, "The school is dismissed, you may go." So from beginning till the church bell, midday, he continued his classes one after another. And when the church bell struck for the midday prayer, he concluded. He called it a day and said, or he gestured, that the class is dismissed. He permit everyone in the class to go their houses. This is the story of the last lesson. Now let us check some questions. And now it is the question time. All these questions are given here to write down their answers by the students themselves. Don't refer in any book or guide. You read the text and write the answers of your own. Look at the first question. Whom are to be reproached for little France's inability to recite the rules of participles, and how? Two parts have this question. First, whom are to be reproached? Reproached means to be accused or to be blamed. To be blamed for that little France's inability to know his French language, and how. How we can find fault with these three groups of people, the three stakeholders of this system. Question number second. Discuss the theme of linguistic chauvinism as expressed in the story. It's a question for 5 marks. The important or major theme discussed in the story, linguistic chauvinism. Write about that. Question number 3. What were the lessons M. Hamel taught in the class and how were they? What lessons that M. Hamel taught in the classroom and how they were felt to the students, especially little Franz. Question number 4. Why did the children not listen to the Beatles? Why did the children not listen to the Beatles? 2 mark question. Fifth question is, what do you understand by this? Will they make these pigeons sing in German? This is a thought expressed by little Franz. What is the meaning of this thought? Next question. Question number 6. What made Franz understand the grammar lesson so easy? He felt that the grammar lesson of the last class was so easy for him? Write the reason. Question number 7. He had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. What led Franz to make this remark? He had the courage to hear. He heard all the lessons the children expressed in the classroom. So, what led Franz to make this remark? You have to write. Then, question number 8. How did Monsieur Hamel behave as the last lesson came to an end? Look at the behavior of Monsieur Hamel towards the end of the lesson. Question number 9. Discuss the approach of Monsieur Hamel and little Franz towards the French language and the impact of the order in their attitude. This also you have to write. Before the order came, what was their approach to French language and what changes happened with these two people? Then last question of this lesson. Discuss the appropriateness of the title, the last lesson. Appropriateness means suitability. Suitability of the title, the last lesson. If you like the video, share it with your friends also. Don't forget to press the bell icon. Thank you for watching till the end. For more such CBSE related study materials, subscribe the channel.